gap in terms of young people. There are lots of young people who are unemployed. Or maybe they are employed, but they're not in the statistics because they are in the black market. Again, the size of the black market in Italy is another indicator of Italian exceptionalism, because obviously all economies got a portion of the black market, but in Italy it's a large portion, and we still don't know how much it is. And sometimes we even joke, and the government did that, and say, well, after all, we did very well in the economic crisis because of our black market. Self-employment. Italy got a huge amount of people who are self-employed. 1/4 of the labor force is self-employed. The OECD average is 16%. EU 27 is 15%. France, Germany, and the UK are around 10%. So again, what does it tell you? To me, it's a sign of distress. It's not a sign of entrepreneurship, dynamism. It's a sign of people who cannot find decent jobs or they're forced to be self-employed because of the distortion of the labor market. Another indicator, R&D, research and development. Again, Italy scored very low on that. So if you flip through this statistic, you see that Italy, you have the OECD average, and Italy's score is always on the left side, together with, in Europe, Greece, Portugal, not even Spain. Despite, we don't like the story that Spain is invested in Italy, although recently, the crisis hit Spain pretty badly. But in terms of modernizing its economy, and it's been doing much better than Italy. So Italy is more, if you look at this and you say, well, this is an emerging market economy. All the figures show that Italy. Interesting, again, sign of confidence. Italy is well behind all the three main European G7 in terms of the recipient of FDI, foreign direct investment. So investors do not trust Italy. But it's also scored very high in terms of outflow, capital outflow. So Italians tend to take their money. Now, it's less the case because the euro has sort of rebalanced a bit in terms of exchange rate risk. But Italians are very happy to. So basically, Italy is not trusted. There's not much trust in Italy in terms, again, the rule of law, international investors. And the UK scored very high in this area. And also his own people tend to take their money abroad, as we know from these very initiatives of the repatriation of capitals, right? And final point, again, another sign of distress, which is really incredibly, and again, if you like, is also a sign of this inward looking. Italy scored incredibly high in terms of perceived criminality, not the rate of criminality. It's like people perceived to be threatened by some sort of criminality. And Italy and Japan are the highest country, they have the highest rate of people feel threatened by some sort of criminal behavior. And it's interesting, both countries have a very high, a very large proportion of their population is made by old people, so the population is aging faster. And, Japan is one of the most, I think, one of the safest countries in the world, so they feel they are lots of. And it's the same in Italy. There is all this perception, which is being used by the narrative of, government, also before the election, to say, well, we are all here in the hands of criminals. And which is, but then you see the real statistics, and it's not that bad after all.
Great, thanks, Angela. Can I, at this point, introduce Jim Newell, Professor of Politics at Salford University. Jim has written a lot about Berlusconi and the recent Berlusconi government. His latest book, The Italian General Election of 2008, Berlusconi Strikes Back, I think. I was going to ask you, you're obviously trying to look back at the other Berlusconi governments, but also get a picture of what Italy was like, what Italy has been like under Berlusconi, what life has been like for Italians under Berlusconi.
Before I respond to that,
sure.
Pick up the question of Italian exceptionalism, because it's something I feel quite strongly about, I think. It seems to me, first of all, to make what I guess is an obvious point, every country is exceptional in some respect or another. Secondly, I think the notion of Italian exceptionalism has a very, very long history. It goes back at least as far as Armand and Berber's famous study in the 1960s, which I have a real problem with because I think basically is tautological. I mean, it says, okay, Italy is not a very stable democracy because the civic culture is wrong and people don't have the right attitudes and so on, which I don't find very illuminating because isn't precisely what we mean by a stable democracy. Doesn't that have something to do with the attitudes of the inhabitants of the democracy concerned? And I think they actually got it wrong because, they were saying all kinds of things like, well, communist supporters don't support the constitution, they're anti-constitutional, etc. When in fact, of course, the Italian Communist Party is one of the main architects of the constitution. So I think it has a very long history, and I think Italians tend to collude themselves in this image of Italian exception. And I think that Italians secretly like the idea of Italian exceptionalism because in a well, yes, indeed. I'll come on to that in just a second. But I think Italians collude because in a perverse sort of way, if you convey the image that really the country is absolutely dreadful and nothing works and isn't life bad, well, my goodness, you've got to be a pretty good kind of people if you can put up with that sort of stuff and still survive. There must be something really sort of quite special about you. But I think, there is, to put it bluntly, a lot of help given to Italians in this by outsiders who, to put it bluntly, like to look down their noses at Italy. I mean, for goodness sake, one of the best ways of shoring up your own institutions and so on is to point to institutions in another country and say, well, they don't work and aren't we so much better? I mean, I had a sort of interesting kind of experience of this kind of thing when I was at a conference in Germany over the weekend. This was a conference on organised crime. And people who were otherwise sort of, in no sense anti-Italian, very sympathetic, were sort of using the term Italian mafia all the time. And I said, well, look, actually this isn't correct. The mafia really only has any kind of basis in 3 regions of the country, Sicily, Calabria and Campania. All of the local